The cafe was alive with the morning rush, coffee machines hissing, conversations buzzing, and the scent of freshly baked pastries filling the air. The clatter of dishes and the hum of chatter created a symphony of everyday life. Among the crowd sat Mr. Harris, an elderly black man with a warm smile and kind eyes. He was a regular at the cafe, known for his gentle demeanor and love of black coffee. This morning, he sat at his usual corner table, a newspaper spread out in front of him, his hands wrapped around a steaming mug. He took a slow sip, savoring the bitter warmth, and glanced out the window at the bustling street. At the counter, Jonathan Reeves, a wealthy businessman in an expensive suit, tapped his foot impatiently as he waited for his order. He was the kind of man who believed money made him untouchable, arrogant, self-absorbed, and always in a hurry. His designer watch gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and his polished shoes clicked against the tiled floor. When the barista finally handed him his coffee, Jonathan turned sharply, colliding with Mr. Harris, who had just stood up from his seat. The hot liquid splashed onto Jonathan's sleeve, staining the pristine fabric. Silence fell over the cafe. Jonathan's face twisted in rage. "Are you blind, old man?" he shouted, his voice echoing through the room. Mr. Harris, unfazed by the outburst, offered a gentle smile. "I'm terribly sorry, sir," he said, reaching for a napkin. But Jonathan wasn't interested in apologies. Without warning, he shoved Mr. Harris hard. The old man stumbled back, his frail body crashing to the floor. A few people gasped, others stared, too afraid to intervene. Jonathan smirked. "Watch where you're going next time, Grandpa." That's when a chair scraped against the floor. From a nearby table, a tall, muscular man stood up. He had been sitting alone, drinking a protein shake, his hood up, quiet and unnoticed, until now. Jonathan barely spared him a glance, until the man stepped forward. "Apologize." The voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable steel behind it. Jonathan scoffed. "Mind your business." The man pulled his hood down. The entire cafe gasped. It was Marcus Harris, a world-famous MMA champion, undefeated, feared, respected, and he was standing right in front of Jonathan. Jonathan's face lost all color. He knew that name. Everyone did. Marcus knelt beside his father, gently helping him up. "Are you okay, Dad?" "I'm fine, son," Mr. Harris said, brushing himself off. Some people just weren't raised right. Marcus's jaw clenched. He turned back to Jonathan, his eyes burning. "Do you think you're tough?" Marcus asked, stepping closer. "Shoving an old man?" Jonathan backed up. I didn't know." Marcus chuckled darkly. "Oh, but now you know. And you don't seem so brave anymore." Jonathan's hands trembled. "Look, man, I wasn't trying to—" Smack! Marcus slammed his palm on the table next to Jonathan, making him flinch so hard he almost fell over. "I don't hit weak men," Marcus said coldly. "But if you ever lay a hand on my father again, I'll make sure you feel what real pain is." Jonathan nodded frantically, sweat forming on his forehead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." Marcus pointed at the floor. "Get down, pick up his newspaper, hand it to him, and apologize like a man." The entire cafe watched, holding their breath. Jonathan had no choice. Slowly, he bent down, picked up the fallen newspaper, and handed it back to Mr. Harris with shaking hands. I'm sorry, sir." Mr. Harris took the paper, smiled, and patted Jonathan's arm. "See? That wasn't so hard, was it?" Laughter rippled through the cafe. Jonathan's face burned with humiliation. Marcus leaned in close, his voice low. "Remember this moment, because next time, I won't be so nice." Jonathan grabbed his coffee and bolted out the door. The cafe erupted in cheers. Someone clapped, others shook Marcus's hand. Mr. Harris chuckled. "Son, you didn't have to scare the poor boy half to death." Marcus grinned. "Next time, Dad, he'll think twice before picking on someone weaker than him." With that, the two sat back down, their coffee still warm, but the lesson? Ice cold. Word of the incident spread quickly. By the end of the day, the story had gone viral on social media. Videos of Jonathan's humiliation were shared thousands of times, accompanied by hashtags like number KARMA and number RESPECTYOURELDERS. Jonathan's life began to unravel, His arrogance had cost him more than just his pride. His business partners distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with someone who had been publicly shamed. His reputation, once untouchable, was now in tatters. Meanwhile, Marcus and Mr. Harris became local heroes. The cafe saw an influx of customers, all hoping to catch a glimpse of the MMA champion and his father. A week later, Jonathan returned to the cafe, his head bowed in shame. He approached Mr. Harris, who was sitting at his usual table. "Sir," Jonathan began, his voice trembling, I wanted to apologize. I was wrong. I was arrogant, and I treated you terribly. I'm sorry." Mr. Harris looked up, his kind eyes meeting Jonathan's. "Apology accepted, son. But remember this. True strength isn't in your fists or your wallet. It's in your heart." Jonathan nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "I'll never forget that." As he walked away, Marcus approached his father. "You're too kind, Dad." Mr. Harris smiled. "Kindness is the strongest weapon we have, son. Never forget that." The story of Jonathan's humiliation and redemption became a cautionary tale, a reminder that arrogance has a price, because sometimes the strongest people are the ones who don't need to prove it. And sometimes the most powerful lessons come from the most unexpected places.